Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition, all 1,775 poems. It seems like a prodigious task that's laid in front of us. We are now at poem 50. I haven't told my garden yet. We're 50 poems in, guys, and I want to congratulate you on your assiduity. We will obviously work as we can to move to the very end of the Johnson edition. And as we go, we will remind ourselves that Emily is a complicated, brilliantly complicated poet and artist who is constantly challenging us, okay? And yet, at the same time, she's also very simple in so many ways, so accessible. Many of you are observing that by the 50th poem, you're starting to learn how to read the poetry of Emily, and I love that. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've had some exposure already to our introductory set of comments that we're drawing on, as well as the previous, as we said, 49 poems I never lost, we just finished with. Now, this little poem is a fascinating one for us for a number of reasons. Here, we will have Emily, who is directly confronting the possibility of her own death, her own mortality. We've seen this already. We will see it again. And the way she thinks about it here is that she is going to be unable at the moment of her passing to actually tell anybody that she's leaving. There seems to be such a love of life. Many will say, Emily's so consumed with death and dying, to which I will often say, I'm not sure that's the appropriate view. I think she's so consumed with living that for her, dying and the cessation of living is troubling, or at least a curious kind of conundrum for her, because we're not altogether clear exactly what happens post-mortem, as she'll point out. However, she's going to mention gardens and bees as being unable to tell about her passing in this poem. It would trouble her so much. Now, in a letter to her pal Sue, she said it this way in letter 85, quote, "This is but earth, yet earth so like to heaven that I would hesitate should the true one call away." This question of how one comes to terms with one's own mortality, she will call the riddle. And that will be the key word. And in many ways, that's the key word of all of the poetry. I mean, some of you have already said this out loud. Every one of these poems is like unpacking a riddle. It's like doing an intellectual Rubik's Cube. And I would agree with you. Let's enjoy the poem. I haven't told my garden yet, lest that should conquer me. I haven't quite the strength now to break it to the bee. I will not name it in the street, for shops would stare at me. That one so shy, so ignorant, should have the face to die. The hillsides must not know it, where I have rambled so, nor tell the loving forests the day that I shall go, nor lisp it at the table, nor heedless by the way, hint that within the riddle one will walk today. The idea of the hint, and I love this, it takes us back to our T.S. Eliot hints and guesses. The idea that what would I do if I knew I had to leave? Notice, I can't tell my garden. Notice it's my garden, not my dad's garden or our garden, it's my garden. It's personal for her. Because telling would somehow conquer her. It's like, it would make it so that I don't want to die if I knew I had to leave my precious garden. I haven't, noticed the repetition, quite the strength now to break it to the bee. It's, of course, it's an impossible hyperbole, and yet it's so wonderful. I love the bees so much that I can't tell them that I might have to leave. Notice the second stanza. I will not name. Notice it's back to, or in the next stanza it will be the hillsides must not know. I will not name it to the street. So notice we go from the garden to the street. In other words, all of life. Emily is consumed with all of living, both in the private workings of nature as well as in the mercantile nature of the street, right? For shops would stare at me. That one, she says this about herself, so shy. Now, we're going to enjoy the idea of Emily's perspectives on herself. Here, she will say about herself that she's shy. I want to take us really quickly to poem 1009. I was a phobie, nothing more, a phobie, nothing less. The little note that others dropped, I fitted into place. I dwelt too low that any sink, too shy that any blame. A phobie makes a little print upon the floors of fame. This idea of being shy, it isn't altogether clear that when Emily says about herself that she's shy, she is being ironic, or she's being figurative, or she's being literal. Obviously, she was shy to the degree that she didn't maybe often want to spend time around others outside of her close confines. And then obviously, we've spoken about it already, by the end there were even those who would argue she was agoraphobic. But here she'll say, I was shy, and yet I'm going to face death. I'm going to do it, right? I'm going to have the courage to do it. She'll come back to nature again. The hillsides must not know it, where I have rambled. So this rambled will meet in poem 1510. And I love the way that she'll use that one. How happy is the little stone that rambles in the road alone. And we know that Emily loved this. And immediately, obviously, we think of Whitman, and we think of Song of the Open Road, afoot and lighthearted, I take to the open road, healthy, free, the world before me, the long brown path before me, leading wherever I choose. We've given a full lecture on it in our talks with Walt, as we call them at learnstrong.net. Notice she loves to ramble, and she says, this poem can be read both ways. I can't tell the hillsides, man, I'm going to miss the hillsides, right? Nor tell the loving, I love her adjective, a loving forests, the day that I shall go. I've said to you guys already that I mentioned Eliot, T.S. Eliot. I think that Eliot was very influenced by his reading of the poems of Emily Dickinson. You'll, of course, be reminded of the opening lines of T.S. Eliot's love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. I think there's a lot of this poem in Prufrock, by the way. You can go and run to ground at learnstrong.net, our comments on Prufrock. Notice, I can't tell the loving forest the day that I shall go, nor lisp at the table. You'll maybe remember lisp when we were at poem 27, nor heedless by the way. Hint that within the riddle, one will walk today. Now, of course, this is the riddle of death. It's the riddle of life. It's the riddle of Emily's poetry. And she loves this word riddle. Well, we've seen it in poem 29 already. We'll see it in poem 501, in poem 949. I want us to already get ready, though, for our reading of poem 89, when she'll play the game this way. There are the resting rise. Can I expound the skies? How still the riddle lies. I love that use of the word riddle. I'd also like to take us to poem 1222 really quickly. The riddle we can guess, we speedily despise. Not anything is stale so long as yesterday's surprise. Emily loves the riddle. She loves to imagine possible answers to the riddle. Notice, one will walk today to meet this riddle. Notice it's not I will walk, it's one. She's already distancing herself. And notice we go from rambling to walking. Well, what are we going to do with a little poem like this at 2a? Well, I think one argument is that courage is necessary for one to investigate the riddle of life, and obviously the riddle of death. At 2b, I love her word choice. I love rambling and I love riddling. I think those two words together, in some ways, always seem to capture everything about Emily and her poetry. She's always rambling, and by that we don't mean like in some kind of silly way. We mean the idea that when she goes for her walk, both in her poetry as well physically, she's enjoying the fact that there's no necessary destination. That's what rambling means, and of course Whitman plays the same game. And then obviously the use of the word riddle is brilliant in a little poem like this. At 3a, we mentioned Whitman's Song of the Open Road. Go back and enjoy just reading it as you yourself ramble, as we said when we did that poem. It's one of our favorites in 303. Finally, at 3b, what for you is your dance with the riddle? And to what degree do you feel comfortable with investigating the riddle of life, the riddle of death, the riddle of Emily. Thank you.